The Battle of Kursk was a major World War II Eastern Front battle between the forces of Germany and the Soviet Union in the summer of 1943. The Germans hoped to weaken the Soviet offensive potential for the summer of 1943 by cutting off and enveloping the forces that they anticipated would be in the Kursk salient. Hitler believed that a victory here would reassert German strength and improve his prestige with his allies, whom he thought were considering withdrawing from the war. It was also hoped that large numbers of Soviet prisoners would be captured to be used as slave labor in the German armaments industry. However, the Soviet government had foreknowledge of the German intentions, provided in part by British intelligence analysis of high-level German army radio messages. Aware months in advance that the attack would fall on the neck of the Kursk salient, the Soviets built a defense in depth designed to wear down the German armored spearhead. The attacking German forces at Kursk amassed 780,000 men and around 2,500 tanks and assault guns. This was approximately 70% of all their tanks on the Eastern Front. The Battle of Kursk is widely believed to have been the largest tank battle in history. In fact, recent research has suggested that the Battle of Brody, fought in June of 1941, was by far the battle with the largest number of tanks participating, but this shouldn't take anything away from the scale and importance of the Battle of Kursk in 1943. The Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks formed the bulk of the German tank strength at Kursk. The Panzer III was clearly obsolete by this point, with both armor and firepower inadequate against Soviet vehicles, but they were still common, and 668 took part in the battle. The Panzer IV had a much more capable 75mm gun and thicker armor, and was overall a good match for the T-34 tank. There were 702 at Kursk. The famous Tiger I heavy tank had been introduced the previous year and was not exactly untested on the eve of the Battle of Kursk. Most were assigned to heavy tank battalions that were attached to different German Panzer divisions for support as needed. There were several of these, as well as 4 companies that were permanently part of their division, for a total of 146 Tigers, a very small proportion of the overall German tank strength. The Tiger's powerful, long-range firepower and thick armor meant that it was ideally suited to forming the spearhead of the German attacks. However, the other German super tank, the Panther medium tank, was a new and relatively untested weapon in July of 1943. The first production Panthers were plagued by mechanical problems, including a disconcerting tendency for the engines to catch fire. These issues were still being worked out, but Hitler had already delayed the Kursk offensive several times, so the new tanks could take part and they were rushed to the front. 2 immediately caught fire after driving away from the train. The Panther had comparable firepower and frontal protection to the Tiger, but it was far more mobile as well as being easier and cheaper to produce. It was intended to replace all the Panther 3s and 4 tanks, but at Kursk only 200 were available. The Panther was rushed into service before all its troubles had been resolved, and their crews had limited training time, affecting their confidence in the new vehicle. It is a little known fact that the heavy weight of the Tigers and Panthers posed a huge problem for the German logistics too. Previously, only needing to move tanks weighing around 25 tons, they now had to deal with 45 and 56-ton machines. This means that brand new railway wagons, bridging equipment, and recovery vehicles were needed. During the Battle of Kursk, the Tiger and Panther tanks were used in a unique tactical formation to break through the Soviet Pak fronts. The Pak front was a defensive military tactic originally developed by the German forces. It was named after the phonetic pronunciation of the acronym nomenclature for German towed anti-tank guns, Pak meaning Panzerabwehrkanone or anti-tank gun. During the large-scale Soviet armored attacks on the Eastern Front in late 1941, the Germans quickly realized that their anti-tank guns, operating individually or in very small groups and with no central commander, were quickly overwhelmed. The Pak front was developed to counter this. A group of up to 10 guns were placed under the command of one single officer. He was responsible for designating targets and directing the fire of his guns. This allowed the Germans to spring particularly effective anti-tank ambushes, with all guns being assigned separate targets and then firing at once, maximizing surprise and minimizing the chance for return fire. This tactic was found to be extremely effective, and soon the Soviets had simply copied it and used it to great effect at the Battle of Kursk in July of 1943, often using multiple Pak fronts in concert with large minefields, anti-tank ditches, and other obstacles to channel the enemy armor into their fields of fire. This technique was especially effective against the Panzerbefehlswagen or the German command tanks, because it generally caused a catastrophic kill or K-kill that minimized any chance for the commander of a panzer battalion to escape. The Soviet method of employing Pak fronts included establishing anti-tank zones in staggered patterns with multiple Pak groups and intertwined firing sectors to amplify the effect of this tactic. To counter the effectiveness of the Soviet Pak front, the Germans developed the Panzerkeil or the armored wedge. This was an offensive formation used by armored vehicles, most commonly tanks supported by Panzergrenadiere and infantry. The tanks would form into a wedge-shaped formation, with the most heavily armed and armored vehicles forming the tip. At the Battle of Kursk, the Tiger I heavy tanks would form this tip, Panther medium tanks were available the base, with Panzer III and Panzer IV medium tanks forming the wings. The advantage of the Panzerkeil was that the anti-tank gunners of the opposing Soviet Pak front would be forced to constantly adjust their ranges due to the depth of the formation. Also, the heavily armored Tigers and Panthers would bear the brunt of the anti-tank fire, leaving the more vulnerable tanks safe from enemy fire. This was the theory. However, in reality, the Panzerkeil achieved mixed results during Kursk. Initially, it enabled the spearheads of Generaloberst Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army to break through the elaborate Soviet defenses, but in the north, in the sector of Generalfeldmarschall Walter Moder's 9th Army, tank units using the Panzerkeil tactic failed to achieve a real breakthrough and suffered heavy losses due to anti-tank fire. In reality, this formation was rarely used during Operation Citadel. The main reason was the scarcity of the Tiger tanks and the Panther tanks. The first units to receive the new Panthers were the Panzerabteilung 51 and 52. The crews of these battalions consisted of very few veterans with combat experience, and the command elements were mostly made up of untested reserve officers. Both battalions were assigned to only one division, the Großdeutschland Panzergrenadier Division. Furthermore, in the later stages of the battle, the Pioniere or the combat engineers had to lead formations to clear minefields simply because the Tiger tanks were often immobilized by anti-tank mines, as the Kursk salient was heavily mined. At the Battle of Kursk in July of 1943, Soviet Pak fronts slowed the German attack in the south and completely halted the northern German force. With more Tigers and more and reliable Panthers and professional tank crews, it might have worked to break through the Soviet lines, but because the previously mentioned circumstances, the Panzerkeil was shown to be an inadequate countermeasure. The long preparation period afforded to the Red Army allowed for the salient to achieve unprecedented size and sophistication. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you, and see you in the next video.